Hi all, Rick here looking at the strange little triangle ships used by the Tholian Assembly. While extra canonical content has introduced many more vessels, I'm going to be looking at the only two we have seen in the lore. The Web Spinner is actually a class of starship used by the Tholians that has seen at least two variations, the first in the 22nd century, then in the 23rd. However, the classes are so similar that I'm compiling both into a single video. The first Tholian vessel was a very simple design created by Matt Jeffries for the Tholian Web episode of the original series, to mitigate costs. The original ships were pretty much made from wood, and these have since been replaced by newer designs created for the TOS remaster that is slightly more similar to the Enterprise version. For Star Trek Enterprise, John Eves was tasked with creating a newer version of the simple design for a contemporary audience. He chose to keep the front profile the same, but elongated it to make it sleeker. Additional panels were added to the sides to hint at an internal power source. What made the design memorable, however, was not their look, but the Tholian Web effect itself, so on to the lore. Naturally, the main feature of the Web Spinner is the famed tractor-beam technology of the Tholians that can be used to create energy ribbon-like webs to ensnare their prey. Well, I say tractor-beam technology, but that is simply the closest form to that tech that the Federation has. The energy ribbons themselves are supposedly a form of contained graviton beam, but the Tholian manipulations of them are so far in advance of that of a Starfleet tractor beam that it's laughable. There's an added mixture of unknown energy that elevates them to their new function. Internally, there is a single primary generator core that transfers the energy towards two rear spinnerets. These then project the beams and generate the necessary energy fields to hold the tractor beams in place while it's being spun. The power required to generate a web is substantial and drawn directly from the warp core. This means no intensive action can be taken, like combat or warp, while the spinners are active. However, when the web is completed, the energy required to maintain it can last for an indefinite amount of time. The oscillations it produces are harmonic and so finely balanced that the web will not decay, at least not in any time soon, meaning that waiting it out is completely impractical. This means that each web spun is unique, thanks to the perfect calculations required and a real marvel of technology. At least two ships are needed to initiate a web spinning process, as the two vessels share the delicate field balancing needed and computing tasks required to form a stable web. Once a vessel is ensnared, the Tholians have a number of options. By manipulating the oscillating energy fields around their web, they can produce an effect to hamper the energy flow of the captive vessel, disrupting its systems. This has varying degrees of effectiveness, but it's at the very least an annoyance, and at worst a crippling drain of an entire ship. Additionally, these energy fields can act as dispersal for energy weapons attempting to pierce it, disseminating any strike throughout the entire structure and thereby resisting many weapons and escape attempts. The same imperviousness was not applied when firing into the cage, however, so the Tholians could obliterate a captive while the captives were unable to return fire. The grid can also be tethered and moved as a cage by another vessel, so in this fashion they can tow ships around, usually to a base to be investigated. The other thing they could do is gradually shrink the web, crushing the captive vessel with very physical pressure. Deflector shielding is not guaranteed to hold against this either because of the unique energy of the web. The only caveat here is that the web cannot collapse quickly, as the modifications in scale require delicate balancing acts, so it has to be done gradually. The ships were around 15 to 20 metres long, which places them on par with larger shuttlecraft, suggesting that they were crewed by only a couple of Tholians. However, larger ships are introduced in beta canon lore with much more detail given on as to how they all work. In terms of armaments, the Tholians preferred plasma-based projectiles and tetrion-based disruptors. There were 2 four-mounted weapon placements that each housed a tetrion beam and a single underslung four-facing plasma torpedo launcher. The tetrion choice of energy is a strange one, but not unique to the Tholians, as tetrion particles are produced within subspace and decay rapidly in real spacetime. They can also be produced by certain cloaking fields and gravity distortions, as well as producing adverse radiation effects like sickness. It could be that the Tholians' unique crystalline structure renders them impervious to such radiation, so they chose to implement it against others. In addition, Tholian ships have been seen deploying energy-dampening projectiles that interfere with a ship's power. Defensively, the Tholian ships do have deflector shielding as standard, but also employ a form of unique ablative armour. This armour is formed from crystalline compounds in a superheated liquid under pressure, which is then layered with more common hull compounds and even affixed with Tholian silks. The resulting panels make for excellent protection against weapons fire and are used in their hull construction. When it comes to warp drive, the Tholian ships maintain 3 warp field generators, defying conventional Starfleet designs, but hey, it works for them. The resulting warp field sacrifices manoeuvrability for increased acceleration or deceleration from warp factors. At impulse, they use helium fusion generators, where the opposite is true as they are very adroit. Internally, the Tholian vessels are incredibly unique as the species has both extreme environmental requirements and a unique perception of space and geometry. The Tholian ship's tri-based symmetry is more than an external feature. Each segment has a mirrored deck layout, and even then, there are few true walls or ceilings. By that, I mean almost every surface of the inside of a Tholian Web spinner seems to be a floor with gravity plating around each surface. Consoles and technology line each wall that can be only accessed by someone walking on its edifice. And there are doors and entry points connecting at odd angles. All of this can be disorientating for your standard humanoid on board, but navigating such seems to be natural to the Tholians. On top of this, of course, they dwell in Class Y environments, meaning that the internal temperature and pressure are many times higher than what humans can even remotely tolerate, in excess of 200 degrees C, in a methane-chlorine atmosphere. Visitors to a Tholian vessel would be required to wear hazard suits with full life support systems. In later appearances, in non-canonical materials, the Tholian technology around their web creation has continued to develop to the point where they can deploy ready-formed nets or walls as various barriers of varying scales. In addition, they learn how to phase their webs into different layers of subspace and across even different dimensions, continuing their fascination with alternate universes, as introduced in Enterprise. As an evolution of their signature tech, I think it's a good addition. The crystalline structure of the Tholians is reflected in their shard-like ships, and the gossamer strands of energy they produce is all very thematic. So, the web spinner might appear simple, because it is, but the expanded lore on the species has added so much to their history and design that I find intriguing. The relationship with physical space, the unusual interior and hostile atmospheres all add up to creating a species in Star Trek that I find truly alien. And that's cool. Well, actually it's exceedingly hot, but cool. Thanks for watching this breakdown of the Tholian Web spinners. I've been Rick, and until the next one, goodbye.